Hey everybody, Edo here, and this week for my league video, I'm going to go back to the indie lessons thread and pick up where I left off with Wolverine Soft. So after Wolverine Soft, I was graduating, and I was actually going to be part of the JET program in Japan. I was a Japanese major, if you knew or didn't, whatever. Anyway, I was getting ready. I had 1 week to accept the offer, and a good friend of mine, John, said, "Wait! Don't go to Japan. Start a company making a video game with me." And I was like, what game do you want to make? Like, what? I'm leaving in a week, man. I got to pack up my stuff. And he was like, no. You did the Wolverine Soft. It'll be great. We could get all those people together and make a game. And I was like, dude, I'm not stepping away from this opportunity to start a company with you and make a game when I don't even know what the game is. I was like, all right. You got 1 day to convince me what game we should make. And then I'll make the decision. But there's got to be a game, right? And so, I don't know, it must have been half an hour later. I was like, I'm in! Let's do it! So, I started TheorySoft. And TheorySoft was an independent game company based in Michigan. We did it outside the University of Michigan where I was going to school. And ended up bringing on a whole bunch of the people who were part of Wolverine Soft or not. Ended up being 12 or 13 people working together, artists, engineers, designers, musicians, a whole group of us working on. The company was TheorySoft, and the name of the game was Dark Alloy. And Dark Alloy was, the greatest Game Boy Advance game of all time. I mean, it was just super cool. Actually, in retrospect, it was awesome. I mean, legitimately, I look back at that game, which wasn't made. The story doesn't end well, but which wasn't made, and it is and was and still is awesome. It is so awesome. It is so cool. So cool. Throwback, story-driven, action, arcade, three-quarter view, Metroid meets Zelda, meets everything. It was awesome. And I'm going to talk about 3 lessons from TheorySoft, and the first was, big ideas are a dime a dozen, right? And there's the big idea, but then there's the execution, and then there's the fun. And so the big idea is a fantastic way to energize and get people to work with you and to come in and join and engage, make something awesome, make something big, make something great. And in fact, we proceeded to do that. I mean, we had, art, and we were working on code samples, and this is a video game, mind you, but we were, we had like a 200-page design document and stories and levels. And I mean, the volume of stuff we created, which was in essence pre-production materials. And at the time, I had no idea what I was doing. None of us did. I mean, we had done it through Wolverine Soft, but it was all new. But we just, this absolute mountain of stuff. So, I mean, lesson number 1, and this is a lesson I learned afterwards, right, is you gotta find the fun. And in particular, you need to create, if you're working as an independent company, studio, group, whatever, you need to get to that fun, compelling experience. I mean, I sort of said this about making a game in general, but you need to have that nugget of engagement that you can then allow other people to see and enjoy and share. Now, at the time I did TheorySoft, mobile phones weren't around, and the internet was this. I mean, it was there, but it was a different time, and we were literally making a Game Boy. We had a Game Boy dev kit, and we were making Game Boy Advance game. I mean, look at what we're talking about, right? Nevertheless, it's great to have an idea, but what you want is an idea that people can engage, enjoy, feel, touch, experience. And sometimes, you can take that nugget and you can get it down to, a sprite or an image or a sentence, an elevator pitch. A great example is Potion Seller's Dilemma, a game I was working on with Christina, where she had created a single image that was the entire essence of the game. It was a scene, a pixel scene from Potion Seller's Dilemma, animating that just everyone gravitated towards it. It was like a magnet. In fact, I started working on the project with her because of how powerful that image was. And we moved it a lot further than that image, but that nugget really had magic. What we had was a ton of ideas, a ton of design, all this bigness, grandeur. Again, greatest game that was never made, right? But we couldn't get down the road when we needed it, the support, the engagement, the traction without the fun. So I really believe when you're making something, you can have a big idea. You can want it to be huge, but you need to get to that, MVP, right? Minimum viable product or minimum viable game or minimum viable fun or whatever. You need to quickly get to the magic, get to the nugget, and then you can build and grow from there. But, looking back at the time, and again, this story ends in failure, if you will, a lot of learnings, was we just spent all this time going like in every direction, but didn't pull it together. So as you're working on your projects, as you're with your team, really make sure at any given moment you have something compelling, you have something engaging, you have something fun. Sort of like if you think of agile development and you want to do a release. Like every sprint should be a release. Every time you gather together, you should get to something engaging, and then you can, but then bring it back. So you can show it to people, you can engage it, you can launch it, you can beta test it, you can pitch it, all that. So that's lesson number 1. Resist the urge to be everything and to be big and be huge. Make sure laser focused on having something fun, engaging, and things that somebody else wants to touch and play and engage, right? Unless you're just making it for yourself, which is fine. Okay, that's 1. 2. So one of the fantastic things that happened with Theorysoft was at the time my father, who he's retired now, but he was a lawyer in the film industry, but I asked him to help out, and he was really dogging on me to get some documentation. And so I went through the process. We didn't do anything with Wolverinesoft. Wolverinesoft was a bunch of kids in college. I mean, I think Michigan owns all that stuff. But actually went through the process of both forming the LLC, forming Theorysoft in Michigan, but also creating contracts for each and every person involved, right? Now, not everyone has access to a lawyer, right? You can't always do that. But from that moment on and since, and in every endeavor I've done since, having a clear understanding with the people involved on what the responsibilities are, the expectations, and ultimately their ownership and cut is something you must do. Again, it doesn't have to be a contract. It needs to be a clear representation of the relationship and the understanding with the people. And it doesn't have to be dry, right? It doesn't have to be this thing that, there's always, you feel like there's this pressure on the relationship, on the discussion. You're trying to get them to help you for free, and you don't want to talk about it, but, it will always bite you. And it doesn't, it's about relishing in what you're going to do together and highlighting their involvement and highlighting that understanding. So, again, it could be an email, but here's another important thing, right? Don't slide it in between emails. Don't drop it at the bottom, right? The thing you're trying to do is be clear. Project title, email of understanding, letter of agreement, contract, whatever. Make sure it is clear and everyone feels good about it and everyone understands their role. And you have discussed what happens when somebody might not get their work done or get complete. That's where it's like, hey, if you're not doing your stuff, this is what was expected of you. Maybe we reduce the percentage. Maybe, we handle ownership differently, that kind of thing. The other legal lesson I learned that I really do regret on the other side, and it made sense at the time, it was originally the title and all the work efforts and all that was going to be owned by Theorysoft, and that's what it was, but on feedback and discussions with other people, what we ultimately did was put in this thing, and I think it's called like a monkey split. I feel like that's the technical term. I don't remember. I got to look it up. But basically what it said was, if Theorysoft doesn't do anything with the title, doesn't launch it, doesn't release it, whatever, and we had splits and all those things, after 7 years, rights revert to their owners, and you can't do anything until you bring everyone back together and have another council and stuff. Boy, I regret that. The reason I regret that is 15, 16, whatever, 17 or 15, I don't know how many years it's been later, I'm now actually in a position where, I don't know, I might be able to do something with that stuff. I might be able to put it into a board game. I might be able to, I mean, we had some great, great stuff in there. But, this ownership is sort of dispersed into the space. And, man, I don't, half those guys and gals I don't talk to anymore, know where they are. It's just effectively impossible to do anything with it. And that sucks. I mean, it really sucks. And I think as everyone's working on it together, and there's going to be ownership concerns and things like that, but you want it to stay in a position where, man, when you're in college, you don't think what's going to happen in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. But the reality is, if games are your career, if you're doing this, you really might be in a position 15 years later to do something with it. And so, and that everyone wants that, right? I can't find everyone, but I'm pretty sure if there was an opportunity to do something with that game and it could come out, everyone would be jazzed about it. But again, it's just mired in this past. So when you're thinking about how you put it together, just make sure that there's a way in which it can lay idle and then get picked up. Really, I think that's really important. I want to emphasize it because I look back, everything about that experience was great. Everything about that, even though it didn't work out. But that one thing still bugs me because I want to do something with it, but I can't. Okay, last one. Number 3. Sometimes you got to know and you got to recognize when to call it quits. When to say, this isn't working. When to think about what's going on in your life and your team's life and step away from a project. We were all working on this title, expansive. All this material was being piled together. And then we were trying to get it off the ground. And this is, again, we were trying to get funding. We were, we're basically independent, trying to get publishers to pick up the title. And, I actually went on a sort of cross-country roadshow with any connections I had and cold calling and all these things from publisher to game developing company. I mean, I talked to all sorts of different game developing studios, publishers, whether it was I sat in their lobby. I mean, I went and tried to get support. And one of those places, I can't even remember the name of the guy, but we went to High Voltage, which was sort of, I want to say it was in Illinois. I don't remember where they were based, but they were like closer to Michigan. They were like on the way onto the West Coast at the time. And I was meeting with a guy at High Voltage, and he was pretty EP there, and he was looking at it, and he was like, this is cool, it's a cool idea. But he basically said, like, why would we ever give you money? Like, you're basically like, I'm not playing something, I'm not touching something that, like, I'm in love with. It's a cool idea, this is great, but you're basically saying, check out this not yet complete idea, bank on these people you don't know, and give them a bunch of money to get something done they've never done before. Right? Not finished. Who are they? Never done it before. And, he was being polite and nice, and he wasn't, it wasn't like he was a jerk, but, man, I've said this a few times, I hate losing to logic, but you sit there and you're like, wow. But I went along the rest of the trip and I tried, but I didn't get traction, right? And it ties to that inability to hook that person and hook that experience and hook that fun, and then against the reality of who we were and what we were trying to get to and the odds. It wasn't where we are today in the industry. And so sort of came back and was with John and we were talking about it. And, it was just clear that short of, starting something else, rebooting, going to, really like sort of getting out of the big scene and getting into the small experience, and we just weren't in position to be successful, and that it was, inhibiting all these other people from sort of moving, because everyone wanted to still do it. I mean, perhaps maybe some people didn't, but it wasn't, the team was still sort of effectively there, but most people, I don't know if it had been 3, 4, 5 months, I mean, dedicated time, there was a lot of pressure. This was after school, so people were deferring jobs and other things, and it wasn't the right time. we didn't set it up right, not that legally, but we weren't in the, we weren't positioned well, and it didn't, it, it didn't make sense, and everything about you in that decision comes, wants you to not make that decision. It is hard to say, let's call it, guys. It is hard. It is hard. It is hard. But sometimes, as a leader, somebody driving a project, you got to be able to do it. And you got to be able to step back and walk away and say, you know what, we learned something, but it wasn't right. And unfortunately, again, it wasn't until working at Mind Control that Andrew Leaker taught me that every single thing you ever work on is valuable. And you never know when you're going to want to pick up an old idea and make it. You never know when you're going to have an opportunity. You never know when that company's going to come up to you and say, you know what we're looking for? This big, grand, awesome, fantastic thing. And if only somebody had an idea, right? And that cuts back to that monkey's foot. But, you know, I tell these stories to sort of add some humanity is the wrong word, but just you're living through this right now. You're living through those decisions. You might be doing some big grand idea. Don't be afraid to make it small. Don't be afraid to find something that everyone else can sort of grab onto and look at. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't worry. You can always grow, right? But if people can't see the heart of something, they'll lose it, or the soul, or the nugget, right? 2, make sure people understand your intent and their intent. There's no advantage to tricking somebody. There's no advantage to getting somebody further along and then trying to... Just be upfront, be clear, and if they're excited and engaged, it'll work or not. But I really recommend clear letters, emails of understanding that are standalone, that, everyone acknowledges. You sent it, but they didn't say I acknowledge it. It doesn't count. I mean, it might count. I don't know, but, right? And 3, really, as hard as it might be sometimes the best thing to do is to say, hey guys, this isn't the right game. Hey guys, this group isn't getting there. Hey guys, we don't have what we need. That's okay. And sometimes you got to make those decisions. So again, hope this was helpful. I'm going to move back to the Kickstarter stuff and other things as well, but I like doing these indie lessons, and we'll see how they go. So subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Most importantly, play some great games.